Okay, everybody. Hello and welcome to our next panel discussion here at the AI Society stage. I'm happy to welcome you to a very outstanding topic. It's called The Future of AI in Health. Less paperwork and more time for the patient. Isn't that something all of us want? Whether we are patients or physicians, more time between human and human. And I'm sure that there is quite some promise in AI to bring us closer to this, and this is what we are going to investigate in a panel discussion, but also in a presentation, which I'm soon going to introduce. My name is Michael Klimke. I'm the Managing Director of the Bavarian AI Agency, and the AI Agency was set up by the Bavarian state government to promote the biosphere. What is the biosphere? The biosphere is the Bavarian AI network. That is all the players and actors that are in research or in development or in application in industry of AI, but also in society. And what we want to do is to give this network a structure, to develop it around human-centered AI, and also to make it more visible to the inside, but also to the outside internationally. As you can see, this is quite a large network. It consists of more than 40 universities and the universities of applied sciences in Bavaria. It's consisting of world-class research institutions like Max Planck, Helmholtz, and DLR. It's strengthened by global companies in Bavaria and strong SMEs. It has many research, global tech companies like Google and IBM. It's also very dynamic, an entrepreneurial ecosystem with government support programs, but also VCs. It's a very strong network consisting of graduate programs for students and doctoral candidates, and it's all geared by the Bavarian AI Council and the AI Agency. And the Bavarian AI Council, it's representatives of the university system. It's Alena Büchs and Sami Haddadin, who are both directors of the Munich Eye. It's researchers from extra university research institutions like Helmholtz and Fraunhofer, and its representatives, leaders, executives from industry, as you can see here on this slide. And if you want to know more about us, you find all the nice little cards with our QR code here on the tables. If you want to do business with us, if you want to develop the network further, if you want to go for joint events, or if you have project ideas, please contact us. We're there for you in the Bavarian AI Agency. And with that being said, I would like to welcome our first speaker for this panel, who's going to give a lightning talk. It's Professor Andreas Meyer from the FAU University in Erlangen-Nuremberg. He's a professor and head of the Pattern Recognition Lab at the Computer Science department there since 2015. Before, he was a postdoc at the Radiological Sciences Lab at Stanford, and he was an innovation project manager at Siemens Healthcare. In 2018, he was awarded an ERC Synergy grant on the topic of 4D nanoscope. And Andreas' research focuses are medical imaging, image and audio processing, digital humanities, interpretable machine learning, and the use of known operators. Andreas, this is your stage.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Just let me see whether this works. Yeah, okay. Excellent. So I'm here today, of course, as an AI researcher in medicine, but I also want to bring in a little bit of a personal perspective. Why I think that we should spend more time with the patient and less with the paperwork. So in 2014, my father actually was infected with influenza, and he actually had to go to the emergency room and spend 3 weeks in artificial coma. And since then, he never recovered. So he was bound to the bed until the end of his life, and I took care of him at home for a total of 3 years, and of course was supported by our healthcare system during that period. And I can tell you that our healthcare system works, but of course there are one or two flaws. For example, the service personnel, they spend quite some time on the documentation. And in our case, they had to document everything twice. So they had a digital app that they had to fill out and paperwork, really in paper, checking off the boxes. And I can tell you, in the time I took care of my father, none of the accounting was adding up. Every single month, the accounting was not adding up between the digital and the paperwork version. Also, you have support from your insurance. So, you try to get some support gear, you try to get some extra treatment, and in about 50% of the cases, the first reply by the insurance company was, no. And then I had to sit down, write a letter, and once I wrote the letter, and it was not a very long letter, but it took quite a time for the paperwork. And then suddenly everything was approved. And now I think this is where AI can come in handy and help us. New technology will support us in the future there. And the last observation I made with my father is, I saw him every day. So I knew very well how his physical state is, how his health state is. But whenever we went to see a doctor, it was typically in a situation where he had a severe health issue, right? So he was suffering from mild cognitive impairment. I could discuss with him, he was just bound to bed, yeah? But his mental processing was mostly okay. But whenever he had a severe inflammation, he had quite frequently inflammation of the lung and then a fever. With 40 fever, your cognitive processing goes down. Whenever we went to the clinic, they would not believe me that 2 days before he was just normal and could recognize his surroundings and so on. And they simply would not believe the information that I would bring to them because nobody has been there. And this is exactly a couple of the points that I want to address today, also from a technical perspective. So I think what's going on today is we're treating most patients only when they have acute symptoms. But maybe we need more support than that. And I think this is where AI and sensing can come in. So we have super high supervision in the clinical setting, but as soon as you're back at home, the supervision goes down. Yeah? There's nobody there. There's maybe a caretaker. They have very faint documentation. So the amount of feedback that you have during the time at home is much smaller. And particularly in chronic disease, this creates a heavy information imbalance that we should also address. And yeah, there's close to no support outside the clinic. So we have really high-tech sensors already available, but most of the time they're in specialized centers. We have wonderful scanners in the university clinics, 7 Tesla scanners. We can make wonderful images, understand the brain, drive disease understanding, but it's very hard to keep track at home, at bedside. So we probably need better sensors and better processing of the data. So there are sensors available. And I can tell you, for example, I'm using this Apple Watch here. I track a lot, and I can tell you I had lunch with 340 calories, and my total calorie consumption today is 1,069 calories. You may believe that or not, or how many calories I spent. But I can tell you with sensors like this, relatively simple, unintrusive sensors, I managed to lose about 40 kilos of body weight within the last 2 years. So I'm a big fan of tracking this, and I think the technology works. And I think we should actually also do that with our healthcare system. So we should switch from only seeing the patient in acute situations to really continuous monitoring, get frequent measurements. With sensors that you can integrate into the watch or other gear that you have on the body, other sensors that can be installed in the patient's room that help to keep track and bring these ideas together using artificial intelligence and machine learning and really keep the cycle from prevention, early detection to early intervention such that you can build a system from health to health and not just at the acute situation. So I think this is what we should aim at. And in order to do that, you probably have to address many points. Everything, everywhere, all at once. We need better sensors, we need better AI, we need this embedded ethics. We need to design these systems safe, but we want to do all of this to the benefit for the patient, then of course for the caretakers, the personnel, and of course the medical personnel. And all of this has to be considered from prevention to monitoring and follow-up. So I can tell you this is of course a huge big picture that we have in mind here, but we are already taking the first steps. So this is some data from the University of TU Munich here, and they are already working on the next generation X-ray sensors. They are able to use phase contrast imaging, and here you can see already first results how they can potentially bring the lung cancer screening to a much, much higher level. So they are able to detect very small changes in the vasculature and in the bronchial structures of the airways, and can detect it presumably much earlier with new embedded X-ray technology. Of course, better sensors are mandatory, but that's not it. We also need to use the sensors that we have in a better way, and this is where artificial intelligence can help us. There's an example where we are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve the image formation process. This is magnetic resonance imaging, and we can get better contrasts, faster image acquisition using the techniques of machine learning in order to get us to images that take only a fraction of the time for the acquisition, much, much higher patient benefit, and they can also lead to higher resolution and better diagnosis. But it doesn't end with new sensors, new imaging. It's also about the understanding of disease. So images, diagnostic tools, they are of course important, but we have to link this to the analysis and the understanding. So if you have a problem with the heart, you can see, okay, it's not beating in a regular way, but you want to understand why isn't it beating in the right way. So we have to bring it together with the clinical knowledge and understanding, for example, here, the inflammatory processes that are going on in the tissue, and trying to link those with lab diagnostics and gain an understanding of the disease that allow us to track those things also potentially at the patient's home. And obviously, one point that we also have to keep in mind is that we get these things safe. This is, of course, patient safety, that we create safe algorithms, but also the data security and techniques like distributed learning uses federated learning and things like that are already being developed, and they will support us to get there. So in total, I think we have to address many different locations, and this starts from the sensing, from the imaging, then all the way to the way how we analyze the data using AI and machine learning. Then all of this is nice, but if you have new algorithms and new sensors, they're useless if they are not at the patient bedside. It has to reach the patient, so it has to be combined with clinical translation. And lastly, we should follow an embedded ethics approach where we really think of ethics and ethical implications of the algorithms, the imaging, and how we are getting our information, that at every point of the development and the research, we keep the ethics in our mind and design systems such that they're thought from a patient perspective and from an ethical perspective from the start until the actual deployment, and also during the deployment in clinical practice. Sometimes patient population changes, diseases change, and you have to reevaluate all the time. All right, so let's go back to the idea of creating less paperwork. We've been talking to radiologists, and one high throughput example is chest X-ray imaging. And how they process the data is they take a chest X-ray and they have maybe something like 30 seconds to look at the image and create the documentation. They already use AI because they use speech recognition to create the reports. So they look at the image and then they essentially dictate all of the findings that ends up in a report, gets corrected and sent to PACS. But I think we can do better. So one thing that we can already do is we can have automatic processing and create an initial version of the report. The report may be flawed, and you need a medical doctor, of course, a radiologist to look at it. But potentially you can be even faster if you have a first suggestion for the report and then add the corrections on top. And with large language models, we are able to do this. Unfortunately, for the interest in time, I couldn't show a full video of the system, but you can actually dictate the changes to the report and it will fix it. And the next thing that we will do is not just have a natural language report, but also automatically translate it to a machine-readable format, such that the machines and the natural language report can be translated into each other and essentially represent the same meaning. And this will allow us then to integrate into other hospital systems and so on. And we hope that this way we can save time for the documentation purposes, like at the bedside and in many other situations, that these things get filled out automatically, are consistent, are reliable, and we have more time for the patient and spend the time where it is actually needed. Okay, that's already it. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm also looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Meyer. I would keep the questions for after the panel discussion, but please stay here on stage, and my role is just to introduce our host for this session. It's Katharina Breininger. Please come on stage, Katharina. Katharina, she's a professor at the Department of Artificial Intelligence and Biomedical Engineering, also at University of Erlangen-Nuremberg. She's the head of the Lab for Artificial Intelligence and Medical Imaging. And Katharina's research focuses on the use of computer vision and machine learning for medical imaging and for different application scenarios such as interventional imaging and digital pathology. Please go ahead, Katharina.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. And I'm very happy to welcome additional panelists to the stage, Daniel Rückert and Alena Büchs. Kommst du hier rüber? Great. And so for those of you who maybe joined only for this session, I think Andreas was just introduced a couple of minutes ago, so I'll skip that part. But I'm very happy to introduce Alena for this panel discussion. She was already quite active in the previous discussion, and I'm now very happy that she is actually a panelist, now able to just speak her mind on any of the questions that I ask her. Alena is a professor at TU Munich and since 2018 the director of the Institute for History and Ethics in Medicine. She studied both medicine and social science, so this is quite a unique perspective that I think she will bring to this table. Even closer, okay, all right. She's a member of a number of influential committees and boards, so I won't mention all, just a few. So she was part of the WHO Advisory Committee on developing guidelines for the governance and oversight of human genome editing, part of the expert committee advising the federal government on the COVID-19 pandemic, and a member of the National Academy of Sciences, Leopoldina. And since 2016, she's a member of the German Ethics Committee and chairing the committee since 2020. Very happy to have you on the stage. Then I would like to introduce Daniel Rückert, also professor at TU Munich and leading the chair for artificial intelligence in healthcare and medicine, also one of the directors of the Munich Center for Machine Learning. Before joining TU Munich in 2020 as an Alexander from Humboldt professor, he led the chair for visual information processing at Imperial College London and served as the dean for the Department of Computing there. He's an IEEE and Mickey Fellow, member of the Royal Academy of Engineering and Academics, of Engineering, and the Academy of Medical Sciences. So I think we have quite a powerful panel here, and I'm super excited to talk more about the topics that Andreas started to discuss in his talk, just diving deeper into the different components of what we can do to bring healthcare to a state where there's more time for the patient, where we have better treatments, better outcomes, and better predictions. And I would actually like to start with a brief statement for everyone. Just what, from your perspective, are the biggest challenges for bringing machine learning, AI, from a lab setting to the clinic, and how does it connect to your research and to your work? So maybe I'll start at this side. Daniel, please.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I think one of the challenges I see from a technical side is that a lot of our medical developments are very much geared to a high-tech medicine. And I think, as Andreas already mentioned, there are a lot of challenges in making our medicine detect disease earlier, but also more cost-effective and allow us, for example, to also translate technologies, for example, in the developing world, so that they can be used and shared more equitably across the entire ecosystem. So I think there are a lot of technologies we can develop here, and AI, together with sensing and imaging, I think has a huge role to play there, and that's what we're looking forward to work on in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Alena.
Well, good to see you again. So I'm glad to be here again. I'm going to say it's two things. One is balancing the need for data if we want to build these applications with the need to be responsible about that data. So this is very sensitive patient information. We don't want that to be misused. We don't want it to be sold or anything. So we have to protect it, data protection. But at the same time, our data protection is quite restrictive. And not necessarily the legislation as such, but the culture we have built around data use. So I've been saying a lot about that publicly, which is why I won't say more. And the second thing is, I think, is a certain reluctance, both in patients and in physicians, actually, to let this new technology into the sphere of the clinic. And both of these things, one is very technical, very policy-oriented, and the other is sort of more emotive, are something that we work on at TUM. You already mentioned the embedded ethics approach, where we try to be part of the development of technologies from the very beginning, to think about how these things can be improved. And it's very, very different things at the same time. So it's very exciting to be part of an initiative such as the baiosphere.
Well, I mean, I already hinted at a few problems in the lightning talk, and I think really important is to get it done right. You know, you may remember the introduction of the iPhone, and actually the iPhone, everything that's in the iPhone has already been there. There was a telephone created by HTC, marketed by German Telecom here in Germany 2 years before. It had exactly the same feature list, and nobody bought it because it wasn't done the right way. And I think that is a key challenge in tackling, in particular, also these challenges, that we get it done in the right way.
So I think that these are extremely interesting points across the board. And what becomes clear is that there is not one area of action that we have to tackle, but actually we have to think about a really integrated approach that considers multiple actors, multiple systems, different interactions of these participants in the healthcare system to make truly an impact and a difference. So let's explore this maybe a little bit further. Andreas, you talked about the different systems, high-tech, low-tech, like we have great, powerful MRI systems, and then these cheap sensors that we maybe can carry with us. So still at the same time, there is so much manual work and so much really low-tech work that has to be done. So how can we combine this in an integrated approach? What are the needs to make this work, to combine it at this stage?
I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is to get the requirements engineering right, because a lot of the systems that you mentioned, only a very partial group of the actual users are asked during the development. And for many of the scanners, for example, you see that these are high-ranking experts in the field, and they want to see new features, they want to see new imaging modalities, new capabilities on the system. And then, on the other hand, the systems are also being operated. And I think, for example, the example in the beginning with the dual documentation on paperwork and the digital one that the caretakers have to deal with, it's because nobody ever really asked them how they want to work, because it's not their decision. So it's the leadership of the service that decided to introduce this, and these systems are being introduced top-down. And yeah, as we already know in project management and in digitization of companies, universities, and so on, that may not be the best approach to create a usable system.
So would you say we're talking about AI here in a sense, or about digitalization more generally?
I think it applies to AI, digitalization. To be honest, I think if you think of the embedded ethics approach, you have to think of the users and the design in all of these approaches in order to not forget something. And I think that's a key challenge that you're not forgetting about the patients, about user groups, about the persons using the systems, and then also about the big picture, is the system introducing a risk to a certain population group? So all of these things have to be considered, and it's a hard problem.
Very, very good point. Maybe we can...
He's doing my job for me.
So maybe you want to add something on that. What does it mean to have a participatory system?
Yes, I mean, Andreas sort of explained it very nicely. And actually, he said a very important sentence. We have to do it right. So we have to do it right from a technical point of view. We have to do it right from a medical point of view. And we have to do it right from an ethical and societal point of view. Because this is technology that will be very powerful. And it sort of touches us where we're very vulnerable, right? We're not talking about the next algorithm that shows you which is the best shoe to buy. But this is about sick people, and this is about life and death, if you will. So it gives the whole thing an imperative, if you will, to not just get the technical and the medical stuff right, but also the ethical stuff. And what we do is this embedded approach where all the, as you say, the stakeholders are sort of kept in mind, but also specific risks that we know these technologies might have. And if you think about those, you don't even build them that way. It's actually not that difficult, right? There's an example that many of you will know this, that training data for algorithms can be biased, right? And if you have an algorithm that is supposed to detect skin disease and it doesn't work on people that don't have Caucasian skin types, that's medically bad, it's technically bad, and it's ethically bad because it discriminates, right? So you can't have that. That's one example. The other example is you have to think about the people using this. I have a colleague who now left, Tum, who was building, she now took over the anesthesiology department at Ulm Hospital, University Hospital, and she built a risk prediction algorithm in the OR, right, where surgeons would operate, and this algorithm would tell anesthesiologists and surgeons in real time the risk of death at the operating table, because that's possible. We have that kind of data. But I mean, imagine you're a physician. These things sort of tell you, ooh, elevated risk, be careful now, or something's not right. And physicians know that, but they don't tell you, by the way, the risk of death has just risen from 76% to 89%. Right? That is a scary thought. But it's helpful.
They rather say, ooh-oh.
So I'm sort of putting this very bluntly, but what this shows you is you have to think about what's the good here, and we do want the algorithm that tells us, oh, the risk has just risen, you need to do something, you need to intervene, and possibly the algorithm even tells you what to do or suggests what to do, but it has to be done in a responsible way that allows the clinical situation to still be the best for the patient and for the physicians. And so you can't do this in the ivory tower, right? Do ethics after the fact, and you build your lovely algorithm and then I come 3 years later and tell you can't do it this way. You have to be there. You have to understand what are the data. Are there any... I have a colleague who works with Daniel, but she also works with other developers, and she just sits there and they discuss the data sources. They discuss the parameters. And you have to be there when you think about the design decisions. How is this going to work? How is this actually going to work in practice? And so that's my kind of ethics, because it's very realistic. And at the end of the day, you sort of get towards an application that is hopefully the best in all the different dimensions that we just talked about.
I think this is, again, super interesting and leads me now to a question for Daniel, because you hinted at that, well, AI systems don't just stand on their own, right? They're typically integrated in a clinical workflow, in a decision process, so they need to interact with the actors in the healthcare system. So maybe, Daniel, you can discuss a little bit what kind of concepts are actually feasible in combining AI and human expertise, and yeah, what is a way forward there? What are these design processes that we can maybe explore?
Well, I think there are some very exciting developments, because I think if you, for example, look at what we have traditionally done, is we have used AI in a pretty static way. You have basically asked the AI system to give you an answer, and for example, your risk prediction, and then that's it. That's where the AI finishes. And I think with the modern tools such as ChatGPT, that's why I think everybody is so excited, because suddenly you can do things where you have AI and humans in the loop and interacting together and sort of cooperating to make better decisions or better predictions. And I think this is super exciting and an absolutely sort of new thing which is out there. And I think, for example, you also need to think about that the human in the loop here can be, of course, the clinician, but can also be the patient, can also be relatives of the patients or carers or people who look after the patients. And I think in modeling all these interactions, and so, for example, anticipating how a particular action might influence how a human perceives that, how the patient perceives that, is very important. And I think that is something which traditionally we have not been able to do. Now we have a lot of new capability of communicating with, for example, natural language, with large language models between humans and machines. And that, I think, opens up completely different interactions between AI and the humans, pretty much in the same way as robotics has changed how we interact with machines and have a much more natural interaction.
Maybe briefly following up on that. So, of course, we have to use the actual people that are impacted by these systems into the design process. But maybe from a research and development perspective, which disciplines would you say are essential for being integrated in that process as well?
I think it's very hard to really draw the boundaries somewhere, because I would, for example, say if you go to a big university like TU Munich or FAU, you'd almost need almost all the disciplines. I struggle, for example, at TU Munich to find a discipline which is irrelevant for this type of work. We have, for example, we work, for example, with Alena on the ethics. We work together with people who look at more societal impact, policy making. We have people who look at sort of how the economics of a healthcare system changes. All of these interactions are very important to keep in mind here. And so I think it's not about sort of drawing a boundary where you say, actually, these people we no longer need or they're not relevant, but trying to integrate them in a similar way, as you say, with the embedded ethics from the beginning. Because, for example, a lot of decisions we make with our technology development will not only have an ethical implication, but also a societal cost implication. What economics are really feasible if we adopt a certain technology, and what might that technology lead towards in terms of cost, for example, of our healthcare system?
Absolutely. Maybe moving kind of now more to something where we say, all right, we do need data to trigger, to drive, to support these decisions. And we've talked about sensing, we've talked about imaging, but maybe, Andreas, you can discuss a little bit or tell us a little bit about where you see currently the largest potential that is unused, or where the biggest opportunity for AI and ML currently lies.
Yeah, so I think if you want to discuss data acquisition, you have to keep in mind that you get the information also to the patient who is actually giving the data. And there's many different ways of handling this. So you can try to keep it all in a secure system in the hospital, encode it, and then do encrypted computations, which comes at the downside that if you try to get a model from a different clinic, you cannot see the data. So if there's a problem with the data, some annotation is wrong, some labels are wrong, you will not be able to see that easily. Then, of course, there's other ways where we've been running an initiative for data donation for medical image data, which is, of course, with full informed consent. But the problem there is, of course, that you need to motivate people to actually do the donation, and in order to donate the data, that's also a certain step, and you also have to be very close to the patient. You have to be able to also delete data then from the donated process, so you have to be able to withdraw at any point in time. So it's also a difficult process, and I'm not sure if I had the solution for getting data in a safe, ethically conforming way and at a large scale. I might not be standing here, but I might be doing something very else.
So when we say ethically conforming, what would that entail for a patient or for a physician?
Oh, don't get me started on this.
Keep it brief,
I'll
please.
keep it brief. I'll really try. So as you all know, there are various policy initiatives ongoing right now. We have the question if the digital health record might not just have clinical data for patient treatment data, but actually might be accessible for researchers. So that is one option. It's very unclear if that will actually happen and how it will happen, but there is one way. And since that would be safeguarded very much, that could be a responsible way. It will either be, as you know, an opt-in system or an opt-out system, and it's very unclear if for research it will be an opt-out system, but either way there will be a decision made by the patient. And from an ethical point of view, that's very important. And the Ethics Council leans towards supporting the opt-out option, because it still respects your right to decide, and you can still say no, but it makes it easier. It makes the easier choice the choice where the data is there. And the second is, of course, the European Health Data Space, the EHDS, which is definitely going to be opt-out, because that's happening at the European level. And there's a lot of discussion about this, obviously, and they're still hashing out the details and the technical standards and I don't know what. But if, fingers crossed, this gets done, that might be a nice resource. I mean, we'd be all over that. And again, the Ethics Council, but that's also something that we espouse at TUM. We're very much in favor being safe with data, being responsible with data, but also being abundant, right? For applications that are not to optimize, you know, a company's way of being able to check on you, because we're very happy to give our data there, but that's actually for a very highly rated social good, which is the health of patients and the health of society. So there is a lot of balancing going on, but I think we are sort of making progress, to put it in a positive way.
Great. So we have now been at a fairly high level, I would say, talk abstractly about opportunities and possibilities. Dania, maybe you can just give us a couple of actual use cases where we see something where patients give data, where we then develop something in an integrated approach, disease pathologies, where you would see a strong benefit.
So I can give you one very simple example. For example, Andreas mentioned already medical imaging as a technology which gives the radiologist, the neurologist, cardiologist a lot of information about the health state of the patient. And traditionally, these machines we've been using, which sit, for example, in our university hospitals, they cost 2 or 3 million euros. They're very expensive to operate, but more importantly, you can't really bring them to the patient. You have to take the patient to the scanner. And with the type of technology we're talking about, we can, for example, build a new generation of MR scanners which operate at a much lower magnetic field, which means the cost of the device is significantly lower. We're talking here about going from something which is 3 Tesla, so that's a very, very strong magnetic field where you have to take a lot of safety precautions, down to something which is 0.05 Tesla, where you can really walk next to it. You don't even have to take any safety precautions, and you can, more importantly, you can bring that scanner to the patient and use it on the patient bedside. If you think about a disease such as stroke, where you really have to make very quickly the diagnostic decision and also decide on the therapy, you can do that as soon as a patient comes in, lies in a patient bed, you can scan them, make a diagnostic decision. And the reason why we can do that with AI is because traditionally we needed these high performance systems to produce nice looking images which are diagnostically valuable. The images from these cheap scanners are typically too noisy and too difficult to interpret by humans. But now integrating the AI and learning, for example, how the patient might look like, we can make these scanners work not only for radiologists to interpret them, but even to give you directly a diagnostic decision on, for example, whether this is one type of stroke which you, for example, should treat with blood thinners, or whether it's a different type of stroke where you need to operate in a different way. And I think that's a very concrete example how this type of technology might really change medical practice with a direct benefit for both patients, but also for those who provide the healthcare.
So, taking up on this and the different points that we've mentioned here today on ethics, on developing systems, on creating new approaches, new sensing technologies, together with actually new algorithms. Andreas, maybe you can kind of close this session a little bit in a sense that why are the researchers here and the researchers that we collaborate with the right ones to investigate these kinds of topics?
Because we're nice and good looking.
And apart from...
Thank you, that concludes it, yeah. It's nothing to add to that. No, I think it's the right constellation, putting these things together. You know, we need researchers from AI, we need researchers, of course, from medicine, and also, of course, from ethics in order to get the thing right. And this is what we are trying to do. So we're actually joint applicants on an excellence cluster initiative. And if we are successful with that, we hope to be, as this team, on this stage or other stages more often. Thank you.
Let me just quickly close it. Thank all panelists again for this wonderful discussion. I think everyone here is very happy to take questions afterwards to discuss also the talk by Andreas a little bit longer and in more detail. I would like to thank you for your attention and to continue the discussion off stage. Thank you.
Thank you.